Hi, and welcome to Matt Holman Talks Mental Health, the podcast where I have the opportunity to sit down and talk with amazing humans about their journeys with mental health. For this episode, I'm so happy to introduce Will to the conversation. Welcome, Will.
Hi, Matt.
Welcome, lovely to see you. So just briefly, quick introduction for me. I'll let you do a proper introduction. So Will works for a company that I actually presented a workshop for, a session for, towards the end of last year, a company called For Housing. And then he got in touch because I always offer out, if anybody would like to join me on a podcast, please feel free. Will got in touch, sent me a really nice outline of his story. So you know what, it made perfect sense. I love people who come to me and say, I'd love to be on the podcast. So Will, you are one of these amazing humans. Welcome, sir. Do your introduction, tell people who you are.
Yes, I sort of provide careers advice and pastoral care for teens and young adults at a social housing company. Passionate about mental health now that I've found the experience.
Yep.
I'd like to share it, basically.
Brilliant stuff. And we're going to get right to that now. So sharing the experience is what this podcast is all about. Let's talk about your story, your journey with mental health. You define what it looks like. You explain it from your words and from your perspective. I'm going to sit back, drink my tea and have a listen. So I'll throw it over to you, Will.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Matt. Absolutely. So a bit of background, I think, for context. It's going to be over several years, this one, and I want to try and take you through I suppose, the journey, the confusion along the way, as much as I can. It has a happy ending, so that's just a spoiler there. But yeah, so I ended up in university in London, studying dentistry, straight out of school, 19. Kind of fell into that as well. I've done a lot of falling into things in my life, I think. It was always just a natural progression from sciencey sort of background, wanting to help people, you know, some friends becoming doctors, that sort of thing. It was a 5-year course, just like it is for the medics, and as you might expect, you pick up a lot of general science background, a lot of medicine. There's a point near the end of second year where the dentists and the medics know about the same level of medicine. They would then go off and do other doctor-related things, and dentists go far more practical, hands-on, start filling teeth in willing volunteers, and things like that. The course was not. It was fine. I didn't particularly struggle or anything like that. I would say I was one of the quiet ones, but I graduated 2012 fairly comfortably, with a bachelor in dental surgery, and figured that was a solid start to my life. But life had other plans, as we'll come on to. So the first year after university is very competitive. It is a vocational year to sort of get you get you out and about in the real world, because dental school and actually being a dentist is completely different concepts. You're very protected at university, I think would be the right word. So there's a sort of halfway house for a year, and I was sent to Doncaster, which is a long way from London, a long way from where I grew up as well, in the West Midlands, yeah, quite in danger of becoming a very lonely year, that one, with all the university friends getting scattered all over the country. Old school friends also scattered all over the country at this point. Yes, but I made new friends, started doing fine. Again, I was protected quite well by my mentor. All the vocational trainees get a sort of mentor dentist experience guy to kind of lead them into things. And then I found a associate dentist position a year later in the area. That is when things started to go a little astray. I was an associate dentist for 3 years, and during that time, while my skills and knowledge and everything increased, I would hopefully say I was not a bad dentist. But the difficulty was the emotional side of the requirements of that job. This was something, I don't want to say unforeseen, because people had certainly warned me about it, but what I thought was that I'd be able to handle it just like everybody else. Just like, sure, they say dentists are under pressure, but been pretty solid up to this point. How you know, I'm sure I could cope with whatever it was. I had that sort of that sort of confidence. But even the very best dentists, and I probably wasn't the very best dentist, run into problems because you can't be 100% perfect in every process all of the time. So when things go wrong, not if but when, and you see 10,000 patients a year, problems start popping up. You get complaints, legal action, and things like that. None of it ever went anywhere, fortunately. To say, I think things were reasonably okay, but it was the impact on me that I was just not prepared for. These were events that would last for months, even years in some cases. That background stress of someone is trying to destroy my career because they feel that strongly about things. That was just taking one heck of a toll for so long. And as I say, I put up with it for years. None of the cases ever went anywhere. I was never found especially at fault, and the odd bits and pieces absolutely fine. Yet that emotional sort of black cloud just wouldn't shift, and it wore me down over years. Fast forward to about sort of 2015, end of 2015, I'm now pretty worried about things because this is just not stopping. This seems to be the way of life for a dentist. From what little bits I do remember back then, I think I wasn't alone in this. My dental mates were in similar sort of hot water bits and pieces here. So like, is this what I really signed up for? It's the question that goes through my mind at this point. So at this point, I'm starting to show the signs. As I say, as a dentist, you're going to get some symptoms, some medical descriptions from me. That's just the way my mind works. I was showing the symptoms of anxiety at that point. I was starting to shake when things started to go wrong. I was starting to headaches, migraines that just persisted for too long. I was physically healthy, but mentally I could see that things weren't quite working properly. I would need to sleep too long or not long enough, insomnia and all the rest of it. And I started, I think at this point I realized I needed a break, so I handed in my notice. And in that sort of profession, you can't just quit the week afterwards. You have to hand in 3 months worth of notice.
Wow.
Which meant I had to essentially put up with this for another 3 months, knowing that I'm leaving, knowing that I'm ill. And of course, complaints and all the solicitor stuff keeps coming in and out at the same time. But I eventually leave 2016, and I struggle to articulate the emotions at that point. It's the realization, it's the relief of being out of that for a moment, with the uncertainty of not knowing where things are going to go next, because I didn't leave with a plan. I didn't know if I was going to go back into dentistry. I just left. I just knew that if I was going to carry on, I might hurt someone, not just myself, but I didn't want small mistakes to turn into big mistakes. So but that's not when things were at the lowest by any stretch of the imagination. I kept dropping downwards. I could not come up with a plan for what to do. I was struggling to, the next sort of 6 months, I was struggling to look after myself. What I would call my faculties generally started to decline, showing all the signs and symptoms of chronic depression at this point. And I wasn't able to sort of pull myself out in any particular way. The leftovers from that job still kept coming in. The letters, please make a statement on this, please contribute to your colleagues something or other. It just kept coming on up until about a year afterwards. So I wasn't able to sort of draw a line under it, which made it very difficult to move on from that life. There is. I did know what was going on. I realized that and I had started seeing someone by this point, counselor type people, who were helpful. And I did work my own case, as it were, because I understood the bits and pieces I was reading online, knew what to sort out, fact from fiction kind of thing. it's a lot easier said than done, of course, but I was sort of accepting where I was at. I was recognizing that there's a problem, and all those sort of hard steps that I thought would get me sort of towards the path of healing just didn't seem to take me anywhere. It was as if something was missing. I just following the best advice from good people, many sources as possible, just did not quite seem to quite do it. I kept dropping down, sleep getting worse,
Right.
capabilities getting worse. It got to the point where I couldn't even check my email without starting to weep uncontrollably. And we went as the next few years are essentially, shall we say, investigations. Very, very little else besides that. It was, let's try this medication, let's try this counseling person, let's try this technique. And while everything helped a little bit, there wasn't a complete picture for quite some time, years, until sort of probably 2019 at this point. My brother was a fantastic help. I reached out to him quite early in the thing and said, look, I can't take care of myself anymore. Please give me a help. He helped me sell my flat.
I just lost you. Can't hear you. I lost sound on you.
Sorry, Matt, is that better?
Yep, I lost sound on you for a moment there. Sorry about that for anybody that's listening.
No, sorry about that.
So your brother helped you to sell your flat. That was the last thing I heard.
That's all right. Brother helped me to sell my flat, my car, stop my financial worries, and I moved to Manchester at this point. He's got one of his flats that I'm still living in, and he's basically given me time and space. That is very important because I couldn't have done it without that. Yeah. But anyway, here we're sort of 2018 or so, and I'm feeling more out of control than ever. Nothing is still working. I'm still very dark thoughts in my head. I do self-harm a bit at this point, blade to the forearm kind of thing. One episode of which put me in hospital, not seriously, but did need stitches. Whenever I did that, it was very much trying to take control of something. Being so out of control with absolutely everything, I really needed to feel like I was in control of something, and that was the motivation behind that, perverse as it sounds. Yeah, so as I say, I just want to use the analogy of a jigsaw at this point, to have a complete enough picture to work out what's going on. Is like building up a jigsaw, and I'd get jigsaw pieces from mental health professionals, obviously doctors, counselors, psychologists. I had a psychologist at this point who was struggling with the differential diagnosis, as they call it. They had things on there like schizophrenia, other sort of psychotic related things that never panned out. I just didn't tick enough of the boxes. But then all the boxes weren't checked off by things like depression and anxiety and things like that, so there was something else missing. Well into this point, I'm also trying things. It's not all just support and care and medicine. I'm also trying to get out and about, joining a badminton team, doing some volunteering. Thoroughly recommend volunteering for anybody and everybody. Doesn't matter what you do in life, volunteering is excellent. It is that sort of helping people without too much in the way of responsibility. It's very high on the rewarding angle of things. I'm helping, still am helping elderly people get to grips with technology, which, as you might imagine, has been more of a thing in the last 18 months, as everybody's getting
no idea why.
getting connected online.
Yep.
So and all of that moved online, so I helped sort of do that as well. A word about the medications, because that's something I've learned. I had 8 medications in hindsight in total, over the course of 3 to 9 months or so, and all but the last one didn't help at all. We don't really know enough about how medications work with the individual's biochemistry, mindsets, whatever you want to call it, which is why a lot of people will say they've been through a lot of medications like this. So if you ever get one that doesn't work for whatever reason, don't take it to heart. Just try the next one. Sometimes it is just a case of trying different things until something works.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
So probably reached the low point middle of August 2019. This is when, as I say, things still don't have the answer, still dropping down, and the self-harm reaches a whole new level as I decide to try and kill myself. This was, it wasn't really a spur of the moment. It's something you kind of work up to doing. And I had planned to do it. It definitely would have been successful had I not, I suppose, backed out at the last moment. I suppose as what happens. I got as far as trying to suffocate myself. Got pretty far with it. I did end up in hospital. Again, nothing too serious. It's more of just there's nowhere else to go, and there's a hospital down the road. I had to go somewhere, sort of thing. And this was. I actually don't want to make too much of a thing about that because that was also 2 weeks after starting the last medication, which is known to be a very risky patch for medications.
Yep.
When medications start playing with that depression and anxiety angle, sometimes it gets worse before it gets better, and it just sort of caught me on a bad day. One of my mates from London came up and spent a whole week with me that night, which was very good of him. And of course, my brother was supportive. Back to the sort of time and space thing again. But this time there's something different, and this is where things start looking up. There is one of the things on the psychologist's list was autism, and it had been missed off, sidelined for a while because I don't really sound like someone who's particularly autistic. And what does that even mean? What does it sound like to be autistic?
Yeah.
But this is a general lack of understanding at the time on my part, I suppose. But it's also difficult to tell because that 5 years as a dentist training and then 3 years afterwards really improved my communication skills, got me, verbalizing much better, becoming pretty extroverted, the sort of things that don't typically get associated. I learned how to be social, essentially, and that's that I think has masked that for quite some time. If you were to go back further, you'd find the picture fits much better from schooling or younger.
Yeah.
So I get an assessment. It lasts most of the day, and I get a diagnosis of autistic spectrum disorder, which I've just sort of nosed my way onto, I suppose, to about the end of 2019. And it is one of the bigger jigsaw pieces, to use that analogy again. Now that I have that, I start reading around what it means, hearing from other people. This is what YouTube and stuff is great for, because you can start to look at other people that are doing these sort of things and say, oh, that sounds like me. And it starts to tick off a few more of those boxes, a few more of those symptoms. Things like being hypersensitive to people's emotions is a common one. It is the sort of, I suppose, it sort of take it too hard. If I had to describe autism at this point, it would be a set of emphases on various aspects of personalities, of your personality. It's a sort of a little bit more of this, a little bit less of that. And knowing that, starting to figure that out, was very important, because I could stop beating myself up when I couldn't do something, because I just thought that's the way I'm wired. But also on the flip side, it showed me that there's also some nice things about myself that I didn't realize. I spot patterns very effectively.
Okay.
Which seems to apply to all sorts of areas of life. It's patterns of human behavior, patterns in numbers, patterns generally that make me quite a good strategist, whether that's playing games online with mates or business decisions, career decisions. Finding new skills about myself. I get back into the volunteering. I find a work experience somewhere, and I get that work experience goes on for a while. About 6 months, 9 months, I come off the medication, which was great. I have to say, medication has its point, but being off it again is very, very nice. You get your emotions back again.
Yep.
The work experience turns into a part-time job, turns into a full-time job, turns into where I am now, with what I'm doing. And as I say, I'm finding quite a good role for myself with careers planning. That's that pattern recognition kind of thing. It's
Sure.
What is this person like? What sort of industry? What do they want to live in? Work in? And how are these two things going to match up? Is this right for you? Kind of thing is something I seem to be fairly intuitive about. So I think that probably just about brings things together, I think.
Just about. It's incredible. You know what, Will, I love listening to your story, because you think of that change, those changing moments in your life, and how things have, progressed through, and all along there was something missing in that puzzle, wasn't there? That diagnosis with the, with ASD, with Autism Spectrum Disorder, and I know my daughter's been diagnosed in the last year on the spectrum as well, and it just adds, it brings clarity. I don't know if that's how you feel. It brings reason as to why things happen the way they happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And how's that been received when you talk about it with other people? How do people react?
I am fortunate on that case. With very, very few exceptions, everyone is understanding and supportive, wants to know more. There was a university friend that was a bit of stigma. There's always going to be one or two. But in all fairness, finding these people and, I suppose, distancing yourself a little bit more means your life is going to be happier anyway. So a big part of this that I didn't touch on was was learning to take advice. Is definitely one of the take-home points from this. Not everybody gives good advice, and sifting out the bad advice from good advice is very challenging. So
can you find patterns in that as well? Can you, with like
very much
bad advice patterns? Yeah, don't they're consistently bad.
That's tough. That's definitely a tougher one to spot.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, it's incredible though. The quirkiness of your, what you're saying is so present in so many people, and yet there isn't a diagnosis, that people go for, and I think that is one of those challenging areas as well. Of course, is having ability to get diagnosed, on the autistic spectrum at your age is challenging, isn't it? It's sort of, it's not an easy process to go through. And go on, sorry.
It's I hear quite a lot of this at the moment. The awareness of these sort of things seems to be rising. And there's quite a few people I've spoken to that have had adult diagnosis of autism, and it's quite different to being diagnosed as a kid, because you've already got 20-30 years of habits, I suppose, perspectives that need to shift a little. So
fascinating. It's fascinating, isn't it? And you're working with young people at the moment as well, right?
Yes.
Do you find that it helps, sort of having the awareness and knowledge that you've got now? How do you sort of engage in that conversation, or how does that work for you?
Yeah, it's the ability to tailor advice and things. Most recently I'm falling into almost a pastoral care kind of role. People that are struggling to cope with getting back to work, again, something fairly big at the moment in this world. And it's questions like, am I doing the right thing? Was this job right decision? All these sort of things. And I feel that having been through a career change, having been through some of those anxieties, I can provide some insight. So very helpful. Yes.
Brilliant. So how are you feeling at the moment? How's things for you at the moment, Will? Obviously we've been through this long COVID pandemic. How are you feeling about things at the minute?
So I have been one of the very lucky few that have done rather well this last year or two. This sort of steady trend upwards has kind of from 2 years ago has kind of continued despite the pandemic. Most of my mates are online. Shout outs to my gaming buddies. They've been there. They've been very supportive all through the way. And as I say, that's unaffected by the pandemic because you just log on in the evenings, play games, and it's there regardless. They're there. So yeah. I'm also better with the sort of online communication thing. Maintaining eye contact is definitely something else I struggle with sometimes. Have to force myself.
Yeah, but it's hard though in this environment. It's so hard because some people's cameras are over to the side, so even that is really difficult because I'm not really keeping eye contact if I'm looking at you over the side, am I? So it's so difficult. But yeah, I think we've adjusted and adapted to it now, haven't we? It's we don't worry too much about it. It's even like having flaming backdrops, those sort of things going on.
No, absolutely.
That's incredible. It's interesting you touched on gaming actually, because I was reading some reports recently about the increase in positive mental health experience of being a gamer, and there's some really good articles out there as well. And what you've just said exactly is in tune with that reality. Without the gaming community, it's a bit of an isolated world in many ways, I guess, right?
Yeah, can be. People stuck at home with a computer. What else can you do? So,
well, there's something else you can search for, I guess, which is one of the highest search things. But there's only so much of that, I guess, that you can take on and consume. So we are coming towards the end of this, Will, and you know what? I've just loved listening to your story. It's fascinating, your journey and what you've been through, and the experiences that you've shared, and obviously your evolution of you. The journey of mental health, as I always say in this, is the journey continues. It's not finished. It's not done. We're all on a journey somehow, and things will come to test us again. So any final thoughts from you, throwing it over, words of wisdom, final thoughts, anything you want to share?
Couple of things. So one is I would say cast a wide net. When everybody knows that talking to people about these sort of things is a very good thing, and absolutely this is an extension of that. One of the main sources of jigsaw pieces was Reddit for me in the last couple of years.
Okay.
Because you can sign up; it's mostly anonymous, and I just sat there and lurked on forums to basically just sort of watch 10,000 people having a conversation about topics that would interest, and sooner or later somebody says something that is, profound or valuable to me. So as I say, wide net. That's what the internet is there for.
Yep.
Second one, is sort of, I would say, be prepared to give up on some principles. That's a tricky one. Yep. Not all your principles, obviously, but some principles you may learn are more perspectives, and some perspectives need to change. What I'm talking about there is stubbornness, I suppose, but it's sometimes that goes all the way down to the principles that you've held for 20 years. Sometimes things need a tweak.
Yep, very good. Anything else? Those two, they're pretty good ones, though.
They're pretty good ones.
Done pretty well.
Squeeze more wisdom out of me. I don't know. I would say confidence in that the answers are out there. To be honest, as I say, I'm searching for years, and eventually it came.
Yeah.
So just wait for the answers to happen.
Brilliant. I love that. Wait for the answers to happen. Throw the thoughts out there. There was always somebody with the answer, though. You're absolutely right, and I think that's so important. It's fascinating. Recently, I don't know if you saw it, but they put out this happiness formula. Have you seen this? And I haven't seen that. And the answer to the happiness formula is lower your expectations.
Yeah.
And it makes sense when you break it down, doesn't it? Because we're all striving. Really does. We're all striving for everything to be perfect all of the time. Now, that's not always going to be possible, is it? And the trouble is, we get disappointed when we don't hit the levels that we put on ourselves. And I think they're right. Lower your expectations in terms of, sometimes it's okay to do good stuff. It doesn't have to be exceptional. Good is sometimes good enough. And I think that's a common theme that's running through some of these conversations at the moment is, changing some of those principles, maybe evolving from being so stubborn. My daughters tell me all the time that I'm really stubborn. So that's something I definitely need to tune and listen to, because they're obviously telling me it for a reason. But so interesting. Honestly, huge thank you to you, Will, for taking time out to sit down, to have this conversation, for firstly reaching out and saying you'd like to do this. I've just found it absolutely fascinating. getting your insights, your story. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. Absolutely.
You're more than welcome. As I always say, just to wrap this up, if anybody is struggling, if you do want to reach out, if you want to ask any questions, I'm sure you can get in touch with Will or myself. You'll find us somehow, some way. We are accessible, of course. We are real humans.
Yep.
We're here to listen and to help if we can. But also there are organisations out there that exist today to help if you need somewhere safe to talk. Samaritans is, it's out there. It's a confidential organisation. It helps you through some of those challenging moments in your life. Please feel free to contact Samaritans 116 123, or if you're not into phoning people, you could text to shout 85258. And there are many other organisations, of course, that are there to listen. At the end of the day, the most important thing is don't feel that you're going through this all on your own. This is not, this is now the time to really talk about mental health. That's what Will and I have been doing. We've been talking about the mental health journey that he's been on. He continues to go on. I'm continuing on mine as well. And that's it. So we are done. Will, thank you so much. Pleasure. I wish you all the very best. Stay safe and well and look after yourself.
Thank you very much.
Cheers.